The general reaction to House of the Dragon Season 3 feels like a rip current pulling to either side of hating or loving it, and I once again find myself in the middle thinking it's fine. I always try to approach the show with a level-headed mindset and don't just hate something because it's changed from the source material, but this season is pretty all over the place when it comes to the good and the bad. The best way to approach this season review is going character by character while also analyzing their general plot lines. Starting with Rhaenyra, I like how we're finally embracing her crueler side. This more flawed aspect of her character makes her far more interesting than her Season 2 counterpart, where it felt like they copped out of portraying her as anything but the main protagonist. Season 3 completely rectifies this and also allows Emma D'Arcy to fully unleash and give a powerhouse of a performance. HBO is definitely salivating at the prospects for an acting Emmy nomination. Rhaenyra though isn't without issues because writing-wise, it's a surprising choice to not give her that much screen time between episodes 5 through 7. It felt like episode 3 was her main spotlight, which was a great episode, and then afterwards they were like, alright, we gave Rhaenyra her whole featurette, so let's focus on other things. This is a bit problematic because you need a more consistent spiral downwards where she's actively receiving a satisfying amount of development each episode, along with influencing the plot. Episode 5 she has a couple brief scenes, and the only standout is her talking to Daemon in the Sept. For episode 6, most of her screen time revolves around Alicent, and we get a very brief taste of Rhaenyra governing, which was a good scene, and I wish we got more of a spotlight on her actually ruling. Then episode 7 gives her more time between certain characters, and then of course there's the big dragon fight. There are some small council scenes sprinkled within these episodes, but they don't reach that far outside of the usual topics of status updates. So I feel this is highlighting that, for almost half of the season, Ryan Condal is misplacing the emphasis on showing Rhaenyra making major mistakes and deteriorating while trying to govern. Rhaenyra's mental decline is present and well portrayed, but the plot surrounding her is paper thin. Like, you probably can't recall much she does governance-wise within King's Landing past episode 3, besides just the conflict of choosing to not pay the gold cloaks. This also as a whole gives King's Landing less depth, and I noticed something in the behind the scenes where they made the decision to not return to certain exterior locations.
Production decision was made with Kevin and Ryan early on that this year we would not return to location in Spain. We felt we'd exhausted the streets there and that we were becoming repetitive on what we were going to show on screen.
This decision has a resounding impact because we coincidentally don't leave the Red Keep that much, and when we do leave, it's only within these two sets, handicapping how big and sprawling King's Landing used to feel. As an example, Season 2 had a much better showcase for the general ecosystem of King's Landing, whereas for Season 3, most things are largely off-screen, lessening the impact of Rhaenyra's role since we're not seeing the suffering that's supposedly happening, which inadvertently impacts Rhaenyra's character. Another thing regarding Rhaenyra is Ryan Condal not giving her any sympathetic traits in the pursuit of squarely putting her into the villain role. One notable aspect that should be developed here is her love for Joffrey. The fact that we don't get a single dialogue scene between them, besides Rhaenyra telling him about the prophecy while he blankly stares at her, is confounding. By not characterizing Joffrey, you simultaneously take away the one thing that should be grounding Rhaenyra. It's okay to give villains positive traits because it makes them more compelling. It humanizes them. I frankly don't know why Ryan isn't setting up more of a relationship between Joffrey and Rhaenyra. Hell, the brief hint that we got where Joffrey was kind of freaked out by his mom was very interesting. This is a compelling angle to explore that shows us craziness in the eyes of an innocent child, really showing us that Rhaenyra is going off the deep end. This also similarly pairs with Darren being corrupted by Ormond, so that's kind of a missed opportunity for having a narrative parallel between the two main plot lines. I hope Season 4 fleshes out this dynamic, but this was something I was hoping for since like episode 5. So I'm not exactly holding my breath anymore. I have been moderately harsh on Rhaenyra so far, but one aspect that was executed exceedingly well was her extreme insecurity and need for validation. This is something that's deeply tied to the essence of her character, going all the way back to season 1 where people questioning her as the rightful successor has been ever present. So Rhaenyra needing and actively seeking that validation through the faith in common folk at basically any means necessary is a fascinating way to portray her decline. Like her overestimating the loyalty of the Goldcloaks as she doesn't pay them and thereby alienates them. Not to mention doing other actions that drive away different parties in that pursuit. Although, it's kind of crazy that the rich nobles never really show up again. They should have definitely been integrated into the rebellious faction within the King's Landing subplot. Staying within King's Landing, let's take a look at some of the other characters here like Alicent. I think most people can agree that if you cut out most of her screen time this season, it becomes remarkably better. The decision of keeping her on as a main character is baffling because during this portion of the story in Fire and Blood, she doesn't do anything. She stays locked up in King's Landing. Her presence this season should only be occasionally talking to Rhaenyra and hanging out with Helaena since that develops her character and that's it. This nonsense with multiple escape attempts and going to assassinate Aemond only serves to waste time in the narrative. You can cut out these things and nothing changes. Aemond is saved and Alicent is immediately caught at the beginning of episode 6. This is the illusion of agency. The character is doing things and making choices, but none of them hold any weight or influence the plot. Focusing so much time here gives off the impression that we're padding out the runtime so we can put Tumbleton in the finale. However, I don't know why we couldn't have given this time to other characters that greatly needed it. Then for her actual character, I thought her arc this season would be realizing how much of a mistake she made by surrendering King's Landing, growing to even hate Rhaenyra, an arc that would essentially partially salvage her character. But instead, Ryan Condal doubles down on Alicent being Team Black, where she quite literally has a hand in killing or almost killing everyone in her family. It was bad up until episode 7, but trying to kill Aemond was just an insane departure that made watching that section feel like a fever dream. I think season 4 Alicent will be much better as she'll most likely finally evolve into her book counterpart when she learns that Helaena is kind of dead. At least the irony there is partially funny. While on the subject of Helaena, she's a pretty hot topic because her end result is the same in the book, but her journey in getting here was a lot different. Now, I think the show's iteration of Helena's depressive arc is good. The prophetic angle was quite intriguing and had some cool details to pick up on. It's just unfortunate that we cut out a major set piece from Fire and Blood, a scene that's shocking and gruesome and has some major narrative relevance by spiking Helena's mental state into the abyss and even starts Rhaenyra's reign on an ominous note. I would go into detail about Bitterbridge, but I'll refrain from doing so if Ryan Condal randomly jerry-rigs it into season 4. Since we're in King's Landing, we do unfortunately have to address Mysaria, but I promise we won't spend that much time here. Her character has always been flat, uninteresting, and borderline annoying, and the one thing this season that could have rectified some of this was giving her the goal of trying to dismantle the Hightower faction in King's Landing. The fact that she doesn't do this and just deals with small potatoes in the Red Keep drastically underutilizes her character. Like, a part of the reason why Varys and Littlefinger are so intriguing is because they always had deep, sprawling, and wide-reaching hidden agendas, doing many devious actions behind the scenes and also subverting their rivals in complex ways. Mysaria, though, she never really evolves outside of being a diet Varys. There was a singular scene where I saw some potential for her, and then it quickly faded away. By giving her essentially nothing of consequence to do, and just meandering around in the Red Keep all season, that in turn makes all of her screen time come across as padding. I've been highlighting quite a few negatives so far, and to balance things out with a positive, let's go into everyone's favorite character, Daemon. Daemon easily carries the season, and that's primarily because he's being utilized in almost every plotline. The Riverlands, King's Landing, meeting with Rhaena, and he even shows up just in time for the climax of Tumbleton. So this is an example of a change from the source material that I'd gladly take. Ryan made the calculation that Daemon is a beloved character, and a lot of these set pieces need a main character to drive them. Since Fire and Blood was a history book, George wasn't that preoccupied with having main character POVs for some of these battles. So altering the narrative to have Daemon be the lead for Tumbleton as an example is a good idea. On this notion, Daemon is also so great that it becomes tough to choose where he should be. Because I personally would have loved to see him in the Riverlands longer, actually showcasing Fish Feed and setting up these other side characters, but I can see why he's been in King's Landing more. Pairing him up with Rhaenyra is always good, and he simultaneously pushes her down her arc, embracing strength and leaning into the tyranny of the Targaryens. And while he's doing that, he has a tangible and compelling goal of rooting out the rebellious figures that are killing his gold cloaks. Even though I'd say this plotline kind of went nowhere and fizzles out. Talking about good characters, let's go over to Tumbleton and analyze Ormond, Darren, and Gwaine. Ormond as a whole in this plotline is by far the best deviation from Fire and Blood. It puts way more attention on Tumbleton as being the climactic event of the season, makes this plotline more logical with holding the town hostage and protecting them from Team Black's dragons, and given the extra time we spend here, we deeply characterize Ormond and Darren. Ryan has a mostly inconsistent track record of fleshing out characters from Fire and Blood, but Ormond is thankfully a glowing highlight, embodying the hatred the Hightowers have for the Targaryens that stretches back generations. He's smart and cunning, has multiple and fun quirky weaknesses, and his pairing with Darren is complex. This is a Targaryen that he's trying to corrupt, molding him into a Hightower and implanting him as a ruler that heeds his will, showcasing Ormond's personal ambition with a crushing toxic fume of vanity. That's all great, and given his dynamic with Darren, that now makes his character very sympathetic. You feel bad for this kid who just wants to vibe with his adorable dragon. He's being dragged into a civil war where he'll most likely die, declared as a king that he literally didn't even ask for. He's basically a prisoner in his own house, a puppet, and seeing this boil over when Gwaine entered Tumbleton really emphasizes how bad the situation is, giving the conflict of the show more depth where Team Black and Team Green are oftentimes fighting themselves more than the other side. In regards to Darren, I've also seen a sentiment that people are mad we didn't get Darren the Daring, but I think Season 4 is mostly setting up that kind of arc for him. He's tired of being this latent ruler, and now that his controlling uncle has been dispatched, it allows Darren to step up and form himself as being a proper leader. Whether or not this goes well and is developed properly in Season 4 remains to be seen, and of course I highly doubt he died off screen. And then for Gwaine, it's crazy to consider that he was basically a non-character in Fire and Blood, and now he's evolved into being very prominent, allowing the narrative to also retain some more significant fleshed out people on the green side for Season 4. Although, with that said, there are some cut characters from the source material that aren't here. The only downside for Gwaine being implanted into multiple plotlines is the realism and practicality of him physically being able to be in the Riverlands and Tumbleton. Like, Gwaine at the end of episode 5 walks from the Riverlands to Tumbleton in half a day. Even with a horse, that wouldn't be possible. This would take weeks of time, and there's no time jump between episodes 5 and 6, plainly showing that Ryan is teleporting this character around, as Westeros is no bigger than a board of Syvas. This also isn't the only case of characters zipping around, because it gets a lot worse in the later episodes, straight up making certain plot points contrived. I can be partially forgiving if this was done once, and for a character that benefits from being in Tumbleton, but doing it multiple times really starts to highlight a lazy crutch in the writing. While on the green side, let's shift over to the plot dead zone that is Harrenhal. Having two back-to-back seasons where a character is trapped here the entire time with nothing to do is kind of funny when you think about it, because Ryan Condal is using this location to freeze characters who don't have much to do plot-wise in Fire and Blood during these stretches of time. Or given how Ryan is adapting the story, he has to artificially elongate certain plot points. So Harrenhal is like the carbonite for any character that stays here. For Aemond, this raises a question. Was the time spent here ultimately good? Not really. Given that Aemond is going down an introspective character arc of regretting trying to kill his brother, and he feels he's being punished for his actions, this should have been explored in a deeper way. Like, I don't know if Ryan Condal got bullied out of not doing any more dream scenes, but exploring one of, and if not the most complex mind in the show through psychedelic and abstract dreams would have been great. I could be in the minority for saying that, but as long as you don't do like 20 dream scenes like in season 2, then you're set. It's like the one interesting and unique aspect about Harrenhal, and it goes completely unutilized. I guess besides the fake out Alicent sex scene, which didn't even come across as a dream scene. So instead, we get some okay dialogue. I did enjoy the mysticism of Alice, and most of the events here stalled out the plot, like Alicent showing up and the bounty hunters. Vhagar leaving Aemond as well is a pretty convenient way to ground the character. I'm sure you can explain this as Miss Granny don't fuck with no ghosts, but it's hard to not see the fingerprints from the writers intervening here. Then for Alice, I loved her reveal. Having a more magic-based origin that borderline gives her a form of immortality, and from that she's been around since Aegon's conquest, is straight up cool. Single-handedly imbuing her with this rich historic texture, making her far more intriguing than me just assuming she was a strong bastard. I have seen some people speculate that she's lying here, but I don't think you'd have this level of emotion and insight if you weren't personally there. The last green character on the docket is Aegon, and this was a plotline I was the most worried about, as there was literally nothing on it in Fire and Blood for this section. But maybe that inherent freedom of not having the pressure of staying accurate to the source material is liberating for Ryan. All the filled-in plot points work perfectly well, but the reason why this side of the story is effective is because it's secretly containing a very compelling arc for Aegon, with Larys shattering his outlook of blaming everything on Aemond and forcing him to confront his inner flaws, going so far to not cowardly run away to Essos, and chooses to stand against Team Black, accepting a heroic death, while also subconsciously probably knowing that Sunfire is not actually dead and may save him. Now, interestingly, with Season 3 wrapped up, it's also revealed how crucial this plotline was, where the main aim of this season was pivoting Team Black more into the antagonist slot, while Team Green is genuinely a side you can see yourself rooting for over Rhaenyra's tyranny. But the correct choice is still, of course, none of the above. Besides Tyland though, Bro would probably fix the realm in a few years if you gave him the chance. Then, shockingly, Aegon ends the season by confronting Aemond, which, despite this being an unprecedented deviation, I love it because it absolutely synergizes with both of their character arcs, with reconciliation and acceptance being major themes this season. Both of them are completely changed and wonderfully get to a point where they work together again. A writing feat that seems very difficult in theory, but Ryan stuck the landing by properly fleshing out both of these characters. I'm very intrigued to see where this goes because things will undoubtedly be changed from the book, and that's never by default a bad thing. Sometimes and oftentimes it can be problematic, it just depends on the competency of the creator, and to be fair, Ryan Condal has burned a lot of goodwill in that regard. Let's touch on Rhaena because in comparison to Aemond and Aegon this season, Ryan did her character pretty dirty, almost to a point that it feels forced in how slanderized Team Black is. And I mean this in a sense that I feel Rhaena should have had an arc that was more focused on characters amending their broken relationships. The way it is currently has three massive problems. One, I don't think the justification of going into exile works when Rhaena thinks Rhaenyra is going to kill her over a misunderstanding. She didn't have control over Sheepstealer and she was desperately trying to subvert this outcome. The blame would still of course lie on Rhaena, but not to a severe degree of death. Wild dragons are loose cannons and Jace unfortunately got caught in the crossfire. I don't think Rhaenyra would kill her over that, and she'd see the inherent value of having another large dragon on Team Black, possibly utilizing her in a more destructive way of sending her after Aemond for her redemption. The only way I could see Rhaena being afraid of going back to Rhaenyra was if she was in a more villainous state. Like, why the hell would I go back to King's Landing when Rhaenyra just killed the High Septon? However, that's obviously not the case, and Rhaena's last memory of Rhaenyra was a loving and caring mother. The most logical course from this character's perspective is seeking forgiveness. This goes into the second problem, where this confrontation happens all the way in episode 7, with Rhaena finally getting antsy and tired of living in a cave. To give context for how much time passes here, episode 5 actually states that a fortnight has gone by.
We've traversed the Trident 50 times in the last fortnight.
Which this is supposed to be about 2 weeks, so you could easily have had Rhaena seeking to go back with Daemon in episode 4. She's already been in exile for a while. However, it seems like the aim of this plotline isn't to have compelling character growth, and instead, a high-octane dragon fight. Which, that scene is very flawed on its own, and I just don't have enough time to get into that right now, or yet. Then the third aspect about this plotline I hate is Daemon's plan to conceal Rhaena. Thrusting a fake sheepstealer rider into Rhaenyra's lap is so ludicrous that it makes me question the mental state of Daemon. Rhaena will eventually break. She's not going to stay in this cave for the rest of her life, and there are people actively searching around this area for Vhagar. The chances of her showing up again are all but a certainty. So as a whole, this plotline completely fumbles every character associated with it, and we don't even get a dialogue scene between Rhaenyra and Rhaena in the finale, a scene that should pay off this entire plotline. Which this gives off the sensation that episode 8, or the Treasons of Tumbleton, doesn't precisely feel like a final episode. Some storylines are resolved and others aren't. Like, usually Game of Thrones' MO was having the battle in episode 9, and then you'd explore the fallout with conclusive character-driven scenes that pay off their arcs, lighting the way for an exciting next season. Season 3 basically bundles what should be 2 episodes into one, and episode 8 gets so suffocated to the point that multiple scenes start leaking out that should have been present. Also, this even affects the Battle of Tumbleton, since it only lasts about 17 minutes and there were a lot of threads or characters that jarringly weren't featured enough. Exploring the aftermath of Tumbleton should be the conclusion of Season 3. Like, one example that highlights this is some characters just disappear, like Darren, with not much of a resolution for them. Unless the aim is to make the audience think he died off screen as a cliffhanger. The writing is genuinely pretty rough, and we even see the characters borderline teleport in a means of escape for Daemon because the episode is running out of time.
We are leaving.
Soldier, we are leaving!
Season 3's final episode is like a car falling apart, desperately trying to get to the gas station in time as its budget/gas is running out. Overall, while I do like episode 8, it not being a proper finale points out the structural issues of season 3. We're having to cram in the battle and finale of last season into this one, so therefore, we're extremely pressed for time and need to compress season 3's final episodes as a result. Ideally though, a proper sacrifice should have been cutting out a lot of screen time for Alicent. And I don't know if this is like a budgetary issue because Alicent's screen time is significantly cheaper to produce than most other areas. Like, it makes me kind of sad, but since The Gullet, Fall of King's Landing, Butcher's Ball, and Tumbleton are all in one season, that cannibalizes other big events like Fish Feed. When in a perfect reality, if season 2 had 10 episodes, then we would have freed up more time for Daemon to be in the Riverlands. So, season 3 oddly and simultaneously feels too slow, but yet not developed enough. And I think that really highlights how inconsistent the writing has been throughout the season and the amount of padding that exists. Why other characters couldn't get this crucial screen time is anyone's guess. Since there's still a lot of side characters remaining that I haven't acknowledged, I'm going to sprint through and briefly touch all of them. Criston Cole had a nice cynical arc, and I think it perfectly synergizes with the core nature of Game of Thrones. Heroism and valor isn't what it's cracked up to be, and the anticlimax was the point. It's kind of an r/whoosh moment when people complained that his ending was anticlimactic, despite them adding an opening action scene to this set piece. Corlys was pretty good in the first few episodes, and then Ryan tossed his character out of the narrative to give Alan room to grow. And him being integrated into Tumbleton Tumbleton and breaking the narrative to do so was wildly unnecessary. He both didn't have a good dialogue scene with Ormond, nor was it very consequential to try and sue for peace right before the Greens get slam dunked. Between the two for Alan and Adam, Alan is by far the standout. I love this subdued and conflicted nature slowly melting away and revealing this confident air of Driftmark. Also, an interesting angle to explore him in terms of getting corrupted by Rhaenyra. Then unfortunately, I think Adam is by far the blandest character in the show, even more so than Mysaria, which is surprisingly possible. There's really not much to his character besides just being loyal to Team Black, and his presence in the plot was only being tacked onto Baela, who also didn't have much to do. Which for her, I think she indirectly gets screwed over by not integrating Rhaena back into the main plot. She's mostly left to blankly ponder her future against an equally dull character, and the love triangle that was set up between her, Alan, and Adam is flat out baffling material, with no time to breathe, and it was so jarring and abrupt that I'm surprised this wasn't removed. Baela's ending as well didn't feel earned, as her dialogue with Rhaenyra was practically the first time they properly talked all season. Again, I think this family dynamic between Daemon, Rhaena, Baela, and Rhaenyra is wholly unexplored, and while we're at it, let's throw in Joffrey. Team Green gets all the love and heavy characterization, while Team Black is mostly left in the dust. Pivoting over to the Dragon Seeds, they vary greatly in quality. Ulf is a standout primarily because he receives the most attention, and he naturally has a lot of charisma.
An exemption from taxes, thanking your grace. And for a fellow named Clay,
he's a fun character to follow, so I'm not upset by this, and the only minor thing here is his arc was a bit telegraphed, although it's satisfying nonetheless. Hugh, though, was not featured nearly as much, even going so far as to be detrimental since his infiltration of Tumbleton receives barely any time in the story, just quickly throwing him in to clash with his wife in a contrived manner, and then they instantaneously extract this character with no consequences. Genuinely feels like a rough draft. The Riverland gang with Roderick, Oscar, and Alicent Blackwood have so much combined aura that it's a tragedy they weren't around longer. Roderick especially, where every single second he was on screen, I could noticeably feel my season rating elevate in real time. Torrhen Manderley and John Roxton should have been involved more outside of essentially being non-characters. Seems questionable to have John Roxton fight Daemon as a big duel without him receiving anything outside of being an obedient servant. Larys paired with Aegon was a wonderful contrast with consistent fun bickering, and introducing Tyland into this dynamic was the perfect timed inclusion of variety. Then finally we have Jace, who had a perfect death scene. Love especially how frantic and manic he was before the battle. That paired with Ramin Djawadi's score really built up this adrenaline leading into that sequence. This is briefly touching on the gullet, which I haven't really mentioned yet somehow in this review, but I thought it was okay to good. A bit underwhelming to not follow the battle from the beginning, as the main premise here is a naval battle with dragons. So primarily focusing on a ship 1v1 and narrow pass section was a little unfortunate. So in conclusion, do I think this season is better or worse than season 2? A topic that has been widely debated amidst a culture of everything needing to be ranked, and for me, it's mostly on the same level as season 2. Each season is uniquely flawed in their own ways. Season 2 felt unfinished, became a slog halfway through, and has a couple massive bombastic deviations. While Season 3, I feel, is more consistently flawed, takes certain deviations and throws them into the stratosphere, and has a tendency of misplacing screen time by giving certain characters far too much prevalence, which indirectly siphons development from others. Seasons 2 and 3 also have their own strengths as well, but I could find myself ever preferring Season 3 over the fact that it's at least conclusive, or partially, although it's still basically on the same tier for me. Thanks for watching, and if you want a more in-depth review on any individual episode, then those will be in a playlist in the end screen. My Letterboxd, Discord, and Patreon links are in the description, and have a great day. Thanks to my wonderful top patron, Logan Farmer.